welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making this super cute and easy baby bow. I love to make these to match outfits that I sew for my youngest, and you can also make these for older ones. I tend to make the more plastic headbands for my older daughters, which hopefully I'll make a video about that soon. If there's any other videos you guys would like to see or any other sewing tips or tricks, please drop a comment below. If you have any other tips or tricks to help me, feel free to drop it down below. I'd love to hear some feedback. All right, so let's get started making this cute little baby bow. All right, so let's first go over some pattern pieces. I'm using a 4-way stretch knit fabric, but you could use a 2-way stretch. You just want to make sure the stretch is going to go the long way of the fabric. And so this is a 6-inch by 24-inch piece of fabric, and I use this for a baby headband. I think I've done it for her for when she was 6 months old, and now she's 12 months old, and it still fits. If you're gonna make it for bigger kids, you probably wanna make it longer. And then you're gonna need a small piece for the center of the bow. This is 3 inches by 6 inches, but you can probably use this a little smaller. We'll trim it down after we sew it. All right, so let's get started. All right, so the first step is going to be to take this long piece and we're going to put it right sides together. And you can pin or you can just pull it together with the sewing machine. It's up to you. But you're going to sew along this long edge. And we're going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And because this is a stretchy headband, you're going to want to use a stretch stitch. So you could use a zigzag stitch, a wide or a narrow. I'm going to use the lightning bolt stitch or the narrow zigzag stitch on my machine. So you're going to sew all the way down, 1/2 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch. All right, once you've gotten sewed the long edge, now we're going to turn it right side out. And then we're going to sew the short edges together. So I like to keep the seam on the outside for this part. Put it right sides together like that. And we're just gonna sew along the short edge. I again like to use a stretch stitch, and I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the short edge. All right, once you've sewn that short edge, the next thing is you're gonna turn that right side out, and you're gonna keep this seam to the one side, and then we're going to make a mark, and I'm gonna measure 4 inches in. So you're gonna make a mark 4 inches in, like this. And we're gonna sew down that 4-inch line, and you wanna keep your tails long of your thread because we're gonna wrap that around to make the bow. So again, this is my seam over here, measuring in 4 inches, and I'm gonna sew, again, I'm gonna stick with a stretch stitch. I'm gonna do a stretch stitch on that line. All right, so once you've sewn that, you're gonna open this up, and hopefully you kept your tails long. If not, you could always get a piece of thread and a needle and do this another way. But I like to open up the headband, and then this is gonna be your bow. So I wanna kind of equally spread out each side of the bow. And I like to take the bobbin thread and the top thread and separate them and wrap it around. And you can fold this neatly if you want. I sometimes find with thicker fabrics it's a little harder, so I actually am just gonna tie my bow. Probably gonna do 3 or 4 knots on this. So I kind of knotted it and wrapped it, and kind of just make this however you can into a bow type shape. Might be easier just to use a needle and some thread, and you could sew it up. This part's probably the hardest part of making the headband. But I think that looks pretty good. So then I'm going to trim off my threads here. So next we're going to take our little piece here and we're going to sew this right sides together with the long sides together. And I'm going to sew this again. I'm actually going to use a straight stitch on this because this part's not really going to stretch, but I'm going to use a straight stitch and I'm going to, again, use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, once you've sewn that long edge, we're going to turn this right side out. You could trim the seam allowance if you want. Turn it right side out. It's a little, it's a little tight. So remember we made this 3 inches by 6 inches. 6 inches is a little long. You don't really need it to be 6 inches, but it will work just fine. Okay, so then you're going to take this and I'm going to keep the seam up because we're going to flip it over after we sew this. And you're going to wrap this around the center of your bow. And I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew as close as I can to kind of make this tight over the bow. I'm just going to sew these two ends together. All right, so if you wanted to get even closer, you probably could put on a zipper foot and sew that, but I'm okay with that. And then you're going to trim this off. So again, I have about, was that about an inch? About a little over an inch on each side left. So you could probably cut that first piece only 4 inches if you wanted to, but you need enough to pull the ends together and sew it. I'm going to trim that off. And then the last but most important piece to make it look nice is to turn that right side out so you hide that seam. And then there you have it. You have a cute little baby bow, and you can mess around trying to make your bow folds look nice and even. And it's a little lopsided today, but that's okay. All right, your bow is complete. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any other videos you'd like to see or any tips or tricks, I'd love to hear them. So drop them down in the comments. Thanks again.